Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh, and this is going to be part 2 with my interview stroke conversation with the one-time member of Edsel Auctioneer. It is the one and only Ashley Horner, where we pick it up again. It was just a Zoom thing, so anyway, part 2. Yes, we get back to 1987, a fine year for music, one of the best in fact, and we're talking about influential bands from the 80s. And one band from Minneapolis appears in our conversation. Yes, it's the one and only Husker Du. Anyway, look, this is it. Yes, after logging back in, we get back to the point of the big influences in his and their life. Anyway, Ashley, take it away.
So I think Husker Du were really important. I think Husker Du and the Go-Betweens for the Edsels were really important.
Yes. Yes, because I remember John Peel playing that song. It was the single from Candy Apple Grey, which was Somehow, Somewhere. God, I got...
Sorry, Somehow, yeah.
Well, and I heard it, went, oh my God, I got it. This is my band, as you do. And then it was like the Warehouse album. My God, and I went to Glastonbury in 87 thinking, right, Husker Du. And I turned up on the Friday and they'd already played. And it's like, but I had tickets to go and see them in London on the Sunday, so I had to drive.
Because they played, did they play at the Astoria or something like that? After Glastonbury, was it?
Yeah, I trucked down there in a slightly desperate way to see them, and I just caught.
I wish I had, because Tom and Martin both hitched down to London for that gig, and they hadn't really bitten me as hard at that point, and then like all things, like the Beatles, etc. I really got into Husker Du after they no longer existed.
Yes, well, it was kind of interesting because that production is a little bit on the tinny side. I don't know what they've done, but it's
very the songs are brilliant, but I've got to say the production on that album's not. I don't.
Yes, like it. So I can see why everyone likes the Candy Apple one. And
Candy Apple is a great record,
and I loved his solo albums
as well.
And then I loved Sugar. I thought they were amazing as well.
Yeah, and Sugar were brilliant live as well. And I think there was a little scene that partly came out of this love of Husker Du, and Senseless Strings were part of that, and Mega City 4 were part of that. There was a band called Drive from Birkenheadway, I think, who I really liked. And there were 3 or 4 bands that sort of came up through that, and we weren't really part of that. Because we kind of, like I say, we'd come more from quite a poppy pop. We were kind of poppy, but a bit dark. I mean, really, we wanted to be Echo and the Bunnymen, but we were nowhere near like good enough songwriters or musicians.
Yeah, but can you remember the NME used to bring out those 7-inch singles?
Yeah.
And Husker Du had, Ticket to Ride, didn't they, on one of them? And then,
yeah.
They also did an amazing version
High and stuff like that.
And so they had I think Bob Mould and Grant Hart had a real sort of pop 60s sensibility, didn't they? But just
they did. And and Grant Hart, bless him, rest in peace. I mean, he wrote some cracking pop songs, some absolutely cracking pop songs, and fascinating.
Yes, they were just
2541, a fine epitaph.
Yes,
but yeah, I think when the other band that really came in and bit me hard was REM in those early days. I think.
Was that on the IRS label period?
Yes, the first 5 albums really. And I didn't get into, again, a lot of these bands I didn't get into until I met Aidan. Aidan had this massive, well, compared to me, had a massive record collection and this, what I considered quite eclectic taste, although as we're talking about all the same bands, it wasn't that. But eclectic for a 17-year-old. I went from like the Beatles and lots of reggae to suddenly, well, I've never listened to Bob Dylan or anybody like that. And suddenly there was like all of this music around. Aidan's dad he was a painter and I think he was a lecturer at the university. And their house was just full of stuff that I'd never heard of or seen. And it became an education,
Yeah, it's interesting because I was in an interview the other night with somebody, I can't remember, but they were talking about their children, and they look at music quite differently. They just kind of pick bits from whatever decade ever seen, what they've heard on the film, what they've seen on TikTok. So they don't, when I was going, I didn't have to go that far back in music, but we went, I must do this period and this period, and now I feel like I've got quite a good education, ish. I'm a bit crap with modern music, really. But, with younger people, you think, that's 60 years now when the Beatles and the Stones started to appear. But I don't think they go back and then go all the way back through, do they? They just literally pick.
Well, that's the thing. Like when it was the mid-'80s and you were looking back at the late 60s, that was only 16 years.
Yes.
And we're talking about a period that's how long ago? 86? I don't even know what year it is.
So that would be, it'll be 35 years ago now. So.
Okay, 35 years ago. So something that I should mention to you, we would hitch down to London and stuff for gigs. And when C86 came out as a cassette and they set up that thing at the ICA where everybody played, there were like 5 nights at the ICA, which I'm sure you know all about, etc.
Yeah.
We all hitched down to London and went to every night.
There you go.
And we were I was 17 or something like that.
I know, that's what we did.
I can't believe we got tickets. I don't know how we got tickets. Or how we didn't go to the night when Stump played, I have to admit, which is, they weren't really doing it for me. But we went to every other night and we would sleep on the streets afterwards because we didn't have anywhere to go.
God, that is so hardcore, isn't it?
Well, it was just an adventure in retrospect, but also in retrospect, it does sound pretty hardcore. So Valerie and the Malchicks. So this was pre-Edsel's. The whole band went down, and we went to each night, and we were like kids. I mean, I think half of us were old enough to actually be in the ICA after 6 o'clock.
Did you see the documentary on the Nightingales with Rob Lloyd and this?
I haven't seen it, but I have heard about it, and a friend of mine's one of the producers, I think.
Right, Fire Records.
But I haven't seen it. I've heard it's very good. Is it good?
It's amazing. It is. And Stuart Lee holds it together as the narrator who's chatting to him here and there. But there were stories about him, sort of walking around going, around the back of a car park or a sort of car showroom, which was open. He said, I slept here for a period of time, and just, it was just
you had to, eventually when we signed to Decoy, that Mega City 4 and Census things were on, we would be doing gigs in London quite often, but we never had anywhere to stay. And so we would either sleep in the van, or there was 2 or 3 people at Decoy who were part of the squat scene, and there'd be a squat to stay at. And it was, we would be coming down from London with from Leeds to London with no money, and but because the scene was so kind of interconnected, you could still go out and see bands because they would put you on the guest list, and then if you knew somebody I remember going to see Teenage Fan Club and Boo Radleys and people like that later on, and you would have you would meet them backstage and have a drink with them on their rider, and that was kind of the currency. You would share that currency amongst the bands. So
yes,
it was a way of surviving without any money.
I know, because I guess it's the classic thing, and you probably heard this a million times, but, I've certainly found out doing this show that most bands have that 5-year narrative, and, especially in the 80s, but obviously there's into the 90s where, they're the 12-month honeymoon period, they get a single, John Peel plays it, get the session, the first album, things going well, you do the art centres, because every, town and city has a alternative night, don't they? Most on a Monday, Tuesday or Wednesday, like Norwich, Bristol, you've got the Duchess in Leeds and
Leadmill,
and so there's a really great circuit. So that first album and that first tour in the Great Transit is good, and then you get the second album, things are going slightly better, but at the same time everyone's tired, getting a bit grumpy, and also there's also still that lack of money, which I think everyone's getting a bit kind of like, well, what's happening? There is still nothing quite happening. And 5 years is often the period where everyone's a bit shell-shocked. But the other thing I've noticed is that when anyone ever says, we toured America, they often go, and then we broke up, because America often seems to finish bands off. But you sounded like you had quite a good time with your American tour.
Well, it was kind of great. Okay, so when the American tour came about, because the record that we'd done with Decoy had dropped us by this point, but it was picked up by a label called Cocoa Pop that was part of Shimmy Disc.
Oh,
It was written by Kramer in New York. And a fan of the band called Laurie, she got in touch. I think she sent me a postcard and said, do you want to come and tour America? I can put a 3-week tour of the East Coast together, and 3 of the gigs will cover the cost of the tour, like a basic tour.
Mm.
And I'm not sure who. I think maybe Shimmy Disc must have arranged it, but we said yeah. And there was a first gig in New York at this thing called the New Music Seminar, which is a bit like South by Southwest. And well, there was a warm up in the hills in Poughkeepsie, and it was November and it was cold. But we had no money and we had no manager. I mean, I basically managed the band throughout, to be honest. Obviously not very well. And we just said yes. And we basically we went on cheap Aer Lingus tickets with 2 distortion pedals in our luggage with no guitars. And we borrowed everything when we got there. And we did the show up in Poughkeepsie to 15 people and a dog. And we'd already fallen out with the record label by this point. So we had nowhere to stay when we came back to New York. And we played this show, and it was 2:00 in the morning, and it was at a place called the Under Acme. I don't know where it was. Manhattan somewhere. I mean, and this would be 93. And 2 women came up to me after the gig and said, oh my God, that was amazing. And actually, it was a really good gig. I mean, it was packed, and we thought we'd be shit, but we were really good. And they said, well, we thought you guys were dead. And they were like from LA, and they were wearing these red satin jackets. And one was about 40, and one was about our age. And how old were we then? Early 20s. And they said, and Laurie said to me, these guys run this record label. And I said, so what's the record? She said, it's kind of the biggest independent record label in America. It's called Alias. I said, oh, okay. I said, and then she said, well, American Music Club in Eula Tango. I'm like, well, okay. And they said, so where are you staying tonight? And I said, we're staying in this little Dodge Cruiser outside. And it was November, and it was cold in New York. And they said, oh, come and stay with us. And I said, okay. And I'm trying to work out, apart from, obviously, there were enthusiastic redcoats and there was a Butlins vibe going on, what this was really about. And I was trying to, I couldn't work. It just didn't add up, really. Because there was no gear to steal, really. We borrowed some guitars, but there was nothing to steal. Anyway, we got into this little Dodge Cruiser and we drove across Manhattan, and we went down and they directed us, so they knew the city, and we went down a couple of dodgy back streets, and I'm thinking, well, then we haven't got any money. They can't rob us in any way. This is either some really weird sort of sex kink thing, or, anyway. Then we took a left, and we were on Park Avenue, and it turned out they were staying at the Intercontinental. We parked the van in the garage basement thing, got the lift, and we got to this floor, and the doors opened, and there was like this big room with like a massive fruit bowl in the middle of it. And this woman, Delight Jenkins, who was the boss of this record label, said, we're in this room, Archers of Loaf are in this room, Small 23 are in here, but this one's empty. You can have this suite. And it was a floor of the hotel.
And it was warm.
And it was warm, and there was fruit. And we weren't starting the tour of the East Coast for another 4 or 5 days. And they put us up for 4 or 5 days in this hotel.
Blimey. That is amazing.
And then at the end of it, they offered us a $500,000 record deal.
Oh my God, it was
which we signed.
I'm not. Well, yeah, that would have been a hard one to turn down after the bowl of fruit. Jesus.
Yeah. Well, after all that, and it was, and we had sort of 5 days in New York where, because if you played at the New Music Seminar, you kind of got a pass into any gig. Because you were an artist.
Mm.
We had 5 days in New York with no money, but they looked after everything. It's fucking brilliant. Best time ever had.
Well, I would imagine that's probably one of the highlights, actually. So then, this was because you'd done.
But then we went on tour with no money.
Yeah. Did you play Boston? Boston's always one of those.
Yeah. We played. The last gig was at Boston at the Middle East. Good gig, I seem to recall. I remember they had quite a nice falafel wrap as part of the ride.
Yeah, it's great that you can remember the fruit and the.
Yeah. Well, times are hard.
Well, absolutely. I'm the same, and just heating. I used to sort of live in some terrible places in my 80s and 90s. And you'd go in someone's house and you just go, my God, I can take my coat off and my boots.
Exactly.
This is what civilization feels like. So when you came to record the second album, A Good Time Music Of, was this all recorded back in Britain?
Yeah. Well, the $500,000 deal was a 5-album deal,
right?
And it was on a sliding scale. So there was $10,000 to make the first album, and then it rose to $80,000 by the last album or something like that.
Wow!
But there was, it was kind of one of those things where if you'd wanted a career, you could have built one, and they paid for the studio, and we went into a studio in Huddersfield to record the second album, and at that point, the only way we could survive as a band really was to be on the road with a record, and they offered to pay tour support, which was the Holy Grail. They offered to pay us to tour the record, and nobody in the band. Well, Phil and I were quite happy to go on the road, but Aidan and Tris didn't want to go on the road in America for like 3 months.
Right.
And then we kind of got to the point where everyone's lives had changed. Mainly children. Children were part of the equation.
Yes,
and so we did the first album. We never toured it, and I ended up going to film school.
And that was it. 95.
Yeah, that was it.
That was the end. Bloody hell! Did you feel a little bit like when you were watching Top of the Pops at that point, thinking, God, look at those indie bands who all went to see those C86 bands in the 80s. That could have been us. We should be there.
I was disappointed that it hadn't happened for the Edsels in the way that it kind of happened for Pale Saints. But I was kind of done by then. I was really tired. I'd had terrible stage fright throughout that time. And there's a massive compromise about being in a band and working with 4 other people and sharing that collaboration and stuff. And sometimes you just need a break.
Did you watch the Beatles kind of 8-hour documentary on Let It Be, where they were?
I haven't watched it yet. I've heard it's wonderful. The only reason why I haven't watched it is because I haven't scabbed a Disney Plus subscription yet to watch it. And I'm actually working on a feature film at the moment that's set in the 90s about a black metal band in Norway making their first album. So I've kind of avoided it because I think there's going to be too many reference points. Although I had a couple of meetings last week and people were going, have you seen Get Back? I said, no. I said, oh, you've got to see it.
I guess I just wondered what your, the process was, when you were recording or sort of bringing, music, creating the sort of songs, whether you had a similar way of just sitting there sort of jamming, ideas.
No, we didn't really, no. What we would do, so on the songs that I've given you to drop into this conversation as and when it happens. So something like Place in the Sun is a 4-track demo that we did at Harold Avenue, and it's Aidan and I with a 4-track cassette thingy that I think we borrowed off Pale Saints, probably. And we would write a song and we would build it up into bits, and then we would bring it to the rest of the band early on, and then later on we would actually just do that in the rehearsal studio, not in a recording studio, and you would basically work a song up. But yes, I don't think there's sometimes you'd have stuff that would come out of, if you were playing live a lot and you were sound checking, you would start writing little ideas and that sometimes play. But we were never good enough musicians to suddenly go, John, listen to this, blah, blah, blah. We weren't, Aidan would write lyrics and bring an acoustic version to the house. And then we would build a song around it. Or occasionally it would come from us all being in the room together.
Yes. Interesting.
So it was less, we just weren't good enough musicians to be like that at all. I mean, really, there was a great deal of industrial endeavor in what we did, because we were retards. Not that so. I'm sorry. Musically, we were Neanderthal.
Well, I think there's a few people. A member from Big Flame once said, "Well, we couldn't do a cover version because, frankly, that was beyond our ability to."
Exactly, we were very similar. I think we. I remember on that tour of the East Coast, there was one gig that was supposed to be at this place called the Armory, and it was in a place called Cookville in Tennessee, and we just presumed it was some sort of like new wave club bar. It was called the Armory. No, it was the Armory of a Marine base that we were playing a gig at, and this was one of the gigs where we were going to supposedly earn $1,000 because there was nothing else to do, so people would come. And it was in the gymnasium of the Marine base, and there was no PA. We played out of the amps on the floor. There was no stage, and we thought we're this isn't going to happen. But about we took something like $1,200 on the door. There were 2 support bands, and we went on stage and started our set. I was a bit drunk, but like they weren't remotely interested. And so Aidan started playing the riff to Smoke on the Water, and they went crazy. And so then we bumbled our way through half a dozen Rolling Stones covers and took the money. And that was it. It was disastrous. We weren't, we were a proper band in the sense that what we created came from that thing as an organism.
Yes.
And that's why live we were good, because live was real and we weren't musicians really. Although Aidan would say that we were a punk band, but we were a bit more sophisticated than that. But really we were a punk band in the sense that we weren't professional musicians.
Yeah.
We took a little thing and took it a long way. I mean, I'm a much better guitar player now, but I don't know whether that's a good thing with regards to being a songwriter.
Yes, it's quite interesting, isn't it, really? That sort of, I mean, the classic songs of our time, like Ride a White Swan and stuff, you just think, well, yes, it's not sophisticated, is it? But my God, it's amazing, really. So
exactly.
The other songs you sent through, there was It's Gone. So what's the story with It's Gone, by the way?
So, well, it's funny because that's probably the only song. So because you're called C86, that's a song probably from 1986, when we were listening to all of the stuff that went around that scene.
Right.
And I actually, about 4 months ago, I found some still here in the office.
Excellent. I like your other stuff.
So this is... So I still have, like, kind of, this is the reel to reel of stuff. So has it got a date on it?
And this is Valerie.
24th of the 7th, 88. Okay. This is Valerie and the Malchicks. This is when the Blind Hurricane thing. I still have the bloody reel in my office. I actually took, not all of them because I couldn't afford to do it, but there's a guy that I knew in Newcastle who has a duplication and copying company, and he basically transferred half a dozen reels to reels from me, which is where some of the stuff has come from that I've given to you.
Blimey.
That was originally on cassette that then has been transferred back in the day onto quarter inch. So It's Gone is probably from 1986, maybe 1987, and it's a 4-track Port Studio recording done in the attic of Aidan and Tom's house, and that's really early. But I kind of was listening to it and was thinking, the ideas in this are really nice, and it's a really simple. It kind of has a little. I mean, it doesn't sound like it, but it reminds me of that first Primal Scream single,
Velocity Girl.
Yeah, Velocity. Yeah, but just in its brevity, it's something like 2.5 minutes long, and I'm thinking, okay, yeah. I mean, there's about 5 or 6 songs from that period that I've only listened to them today because I was going to talk to you, and it's like, all right, that for 17, 18-year-olds, it's quite a sophisticated. Aidan was a good songwriter, and actually the band gelled, and I was quite good at building stuff around what Aidan brought.
Did you say, because you said you got stage fright, was that kind of from the beginning, or was that something that just slowly kept creeping in and got worse as time passed?
No, it's something that crept in and got worse. I mean, the big problem for me, David, was I cared too much about it. It was really what I wanted to do. It was my dream to be on John Peel and make a record and stuff like that. And so I think I probably put too much pressure on myself and gave too much of a fuck.
Yes.
And I couldn't perform without drinking as well. So I don't think that helped. But it got the stage fright just got. I could have probably got counseling. I could probably get counselling nowadays to counteract it. But I actually have not actually been on stage and played guitar apart from at my brother's wedding when I was drunk, and that was 20 years ago.
Blimey, yes, it does kind of. I think it does happen, and it's kind of weird. I must admit, when I get slightly nervous about something, my right arm starts shaking. It's fucking irritating. It's like, God, wished it wouldn't, and it's like I just get into that emotional state, and it's like, and it's just like, okay, I'm going to have to just think of something else and, have a bit of time. But yeah, it was just...
I should add, though, once I get on stage, that stage fright disappears immediately. It's only before getting on stage. There's no nerves once you're on stage. But it did... there was no logic to it. So when we played at Glastonbury with...
I was going to ask you, how did you do that?
Well, it's the thing, we did a show at the Crypt in Bradford, which is like maybe 300 people, and I threw up before the gig, and I was terrible. And then we travelled down to Glastonbury, and I think we probably played Glastonbury a couple of days later, and I had no nerves whatsoever before going on stage at Glastonbury. And we were quite good that day in Glastonbury because we'd been on the road for so long. All I could hear was the bass drum. I couldn't hear anybody else on stage. Just the beat of the bass drum. And the vocal. So I didn't know. That's the only way that I knew where we were in the song.
Because the lineups in those days were quite amazing. I remember there was one which was a bit muddy during that period, and there was one which was incredibly hot, and that was when I think the Velvet Underground were playing, and I remember sort of managing to get conjunctivitis because there's so much dust in the air that my eyes completely went. But I can't remember if that was and then there was one year, I think 89, when Suzanne Vega she was headlining on the Friday or Saturday and got a death threat, which I thought was a bit extreme.
Poor Suzanne. Suzanne Vega, man, that's not necessary, is
it?
I
mean, what's she ever done? Lovely songs, nice person, nothing wrong with that.
I went to Glastonbury, I think, in 98 for pleasure, and it was one of those really muddy ones. Well, I had a good time.
Was it when the stages were slowly sinking? And I remember sort of every band we went to go to see, they were like, "Oh, the stage is sinking. We're going to have to. We're not playing at the moment." So,
I don't think it was that year. It was. Let's see. Who did I see? I saw Gomez. and I saw. I think it was when what's it called? Tony Bennett was headlining.
Right.
The legend. So
The
I think
Legend Night.
it was. I saw Ben Folds and I saw Lauren Laverne's band Kaniki. They were Northeast, but it was really muddy. And you actually, I had a friend who had scored some dentist's powder, and you actually needed some dentist powder to actually just manage to march through the mud. It was that.
It was horrible. I've done a few.
I've
of
never
those.
went back, and there's that. I much prefer Cambridge Folk Festival, to be honest.
Yes, I know. It's closer. There's more toilets and they're closer. I know them. I think I did. I mean, I did go and see Bowie on the Sunday on that 2000, and we just went. We were just happened to be in the area. We went. Let's see if we're just going to get a ticket, and it was like actually there's no fence, so let's just go and see Bowie. And it was
absolutely. I mean, I never saw David Bowie, so I would have loved to have seen him, but never happened.
So then the fourth song you put in this mix is "Scratching the Surf." So what?
Oh yeah. That's quite interesting because that's kind of Valerie. So the band originally we were called the Mal Chicks, and then we got banned from playing in Harrogate because of something happened. I can't remember. I generally can't remember. And there used to be a battle of the bands at Harrogate Theatre, and we got banned from it. So we changed the name rather shrewdly, I thought, to Valerie and the Mal Chicks. And that was the Valerie was the Valerie of the Monkeys song. And we put some money together. We found the studio in Leeds that kind of liked us, and we went in to record 3 songs. And this was quite a good studio. But we didn't. I think it would be 1987. It was certainly a place where I learned a lot. And the studio, there was a toilet in the studio that was kind of that you couldn't use because Henry Rollins had recorded there and had destroyed it to make some sort of noise for a record he was doing. I think it was Henry Rollins.
Right.
He was around Leeds in that time. It definitely wasn't Iggy Pop because Iggy Pop's Blah 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 had come out, and the engineer loved the drum sound, and our drum sounded so bad that he sampled it was a very early sampled snare drum on the recording, and we kind of let him just do it because we didn't know what we were doing. And I was listening back to it today, and I thought, okay, this is us trying to write a pop song. And I'd listened to it, and I thought it's actually. I mean, it's not overproduced now, but at the time we thought it was massively overproduced how we sounded. But I think it's quite an interesting bench. That was kind of the last days of Valerie and the Mal Chicks. Although we didn't really become the Eds. We were still Valerie and the Mal Chicks when we did the record for the 3 tracks for Egg Records, for Jim Egg Records in Glasgow. And we changed the name when we moved to Leeds, basically.
Yes.
And because we didn't have a band anymore. And that was where we wrote Place in the Sun and most of the stuff for the Peel session, apart from Blind Hurricane. And we wrote pretty much all of the first album. I lived in Leeds for 2 years, and then I moved up to Newcastle, where I am now. All of that first record came from us sitting in that front room in Leeds in this little back-to-back, and treating it like a job. We would work 3-4 days a week writing songs.
Yes,
it's like really a lovely thing to do. Although we never had any money, but it was we were going to give it a really good go before we were 21. I think we were thinking.
Yes,
it happened much sooner, and by the time I was 21, I was knackered. I mean, like that was when I left the Pale Saints, and I was, in a way, all my dreams had come true, and I also got this fucking terrible stage fright.
And that was it. So 95 was when you did your Ziggy Stardust. That just...
Yeah, that was the end. That was.
Did the band? Did you have a moment together? You know, in a pub and say, "Look, this is going to be."
We did a gig. We played a gig. There was a young promoter who wanted to put us on at the Cockpit in Leeds, and the record had just come out. And we said, "Well, I said we can't release the record and not do a Leeds show." So we did the Leeds show. And at this point, I was at Newcastle Polytechnic studying film production, and they'd offered me the chance to go to Toronto to study in the September of that year. And as there was no tour booked in, nobody wanted to tour the UK. Nobody wanted to, certainly nobody wanted to tour America. They said they'd pay for a video, which we made, but nobody ever saw. And we did that last gig, and we kind of knew that was the last gig.
Yes.
So it wasn't in a pub. It was actually, we played live together for a last time, and that was it.
That's kind of beautiful. That's a nice way to go.
It's nice that we did a gig. We and it was a good gig, and it was sad. I mean, the thing is that the Edsels were they were a really good live band when they were good. I mean, half the time they were kind of awful, and it would be literally a really great gig, a really average gig, but we were built for playing live, really.
Yes,
and we spent all our time trying to create recordings that somehow captured that, but never actually captured that feeling of the band live. I remember playing a gig at the Jericho Tavern, and it was like, I think some of the kids who ended up being Ride were there, and I think some of the kids from Radiohead were there, and it was just one of those gigs where we were just brilliant. And years later, I heard from the promoter at the Jericho Tavern that he thought the Edsel Auctioneers were the best live band he'd ever seen.
God, that's
that night.
a nice accolade. So, did you then have to tell your, American label that was?
Oh yeah.
Was that a kind of a tough moment?
I think they still might own the rights to my firstborn. I'm not sure. Because in those days there wasn't that ease of communication. It wasn't that complicated, and because the deal was 5 albums over the $500,000, we'd only taken $10,000 off them to make the record.
Right, yeah.
So they didn't lose out. I mean, and they've never paid me any money back, although they have made everything available on Spotify, etc. Over the years. We've never seen any money from any of the recordings we've ever made.
Right.
But you chalk that one down to experience, don't you?
Yes, and I guess that's the way it kind of runs, really.
Yeah.
So did you, I mean, just briefly, did sort of doing the film school, going to film college, was that kind of just a really nice thing to quickly move into, just to...
No. I was making films when I was in the bands, but I tried to get into film school when I was about 22, and they told me to go away. And so, and I only fell in love with cinema when I moved to Leeds and lived so close to the Hyde Park Picture House, which used to be kind of 50p to go and see a film on a Monday or Thursday. And I started to see kind of classic cinema. And it's a stupid thing to chase. I mean, ultimately, you decide you want to direct films, and that's madness, to be honest. So much more difficult than trying to make records, and that was hard enough.
Right.
So I'm still, in a way, that idea that I had at 21, 22 which was I can't really play live anymore. If I make a film, I don't have to go out and perform it every night, which is what you have to do when you make a record, or it was.
Right.
And so I'm still chasing that now. And I'm 53 now, so what's that? The last 32 years, I've been chasing this kind of ephemeral thing that is me making cinema. And I don't think you ever catch it. I made a couple of movies and stuff like that. And I've had films at festivals that were, I've had a film at Tribeca in New York and stuff. Yeah, it feels a bit like being 17 and trying to get a band off the ground nearly all the time.
God. Oh, well.
Exhausting.
Yeah, I would imagine. Cheesy crazy. And I think on that bombshell, we'll leave it as part 2. But don't worry, part 3 is going to be appearing very soon. Anyway, that was me in conversation with Ashley Horner from the Edsel Auctioneer. And yes, if you want to contact me for some nice but random reason, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 Show. Yes, keep it positive, otherwise don't listen. And yes, these have all been archived. Aren't you lucky? So find those on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. Do C86 Show. Anyway, look, I know the excitement, part 3. I'll put it up tomorrow. Anyway, there you go.